Hello, and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Benjamin Franklin uttered one of my favorite quotes. Wine is constant proof that God loves us and loves to see us happy. I'm a fan of good wine, and so is my next guest here on Scribes and Songsters. And that quote just happens to be in his new book. Windsor's Stephen Kristof is not a stranger on our show, and it's delightful to have him back to talk about his book, Short Stories to Enjoy with Wine, Volume 1. Steve's delightful book contains 17 short stories, which offer the reader romance, mystery, suspense, crime, adventure, inspiration, and unexpected outcomes. And in each story, there's a connection with a different variety of wine. He's also created a trailer to promote this book. And let's have a look at it. Well, that was just a taste of the trailer for Stephen Kristof's book. If you want to see the rest of it, you can find it on his website, Facebook, and his YouTube channel, and we'll have those links at the end of the show. And now let's just get on with it. Steve, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm great to be here.
Okay, so how did you come up with the idea? When I saw that you did this book, I thought, how did he come up with pairing wine and stories?
Okay, so I thought, let's do this on grape juice. Seriously.
Even weirder.
Yeah, no, and that's not going to work. All my friends told me, no, try wine. As much as I hate wine, I'll bite the bullet and do it. Seriously, as you said, I enjoy wine. For most of my adult life, I've been into wine. Yes, socially, my wife and I entertaining, going out. It's a pleasurable part of spending time with people and pairing with food, in moderation, of course. And so having that affinity, I thought, wait a second, this could work. Part of it is, when you're writing a book like this, as you said, 17 short stories, and they're all disparate.
Oh, very.
So, what I really needed was a container, right? I needed some sort of concept, and I thought, why not wine? I can tie them together with that common thread. And that's where that came from. Well,
I thought it was really brilliant. Wish I'd thought of it. And of course, it's not just that, you were pairing wine. It's that anthropomorphism of the wine as like a character along with your real characters.
In some cases, yeah, it's a very direct fusion, coming to life. I think of, I'm sure we'll talk about a few of the stories.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about one in particular, Pinot Noir, and the grape has a notoriously thin skin. So does our main character. Yeah, so I found ways. Now they don't all morph that way.
No.
But it as long as there's a segue, and from time to time in the stories, you may be reading about that particular wine varietal.
Yes, absolutely. Now, for those who want to know, were you imbibing while you wrote?
Oh God, no. No, seriously. I cannot drink and write. Because you hear, I even have a little bit of that in the intro. You hear about writers who were notoriously
they can get
drunk.
soused. Yeah.
Ernie Hemingway. I can't drink a drop and write. I just need to take a nap. So no, absolutely endorse a glass or two of wine if that's your thing as you read, but certainly as a writer, no, I can't.
Okay, let's get to great wine and some of these interesting stories. Now, a wine that I must say I didn't know was Torrontés. That's an Argentinian wine, and your main character goes to Argentina.
As the story begins, after the first little description of what Torrontés is, she has just gotten back. She's just arrived from Argentina, Mendoza. She's an engineer, followed in her father's footsteps. We won't do any spoilers here, but she comes home. Her parents have not been in the picture for some time, and she has a very successful engineering practice in New York City. She lives in upper Manhattan. Her office is in the Tribeca area, and so she's at the top of her game. She comes back and she's starting to kind of reevaluate her life and what she has and what she's done, and she has every bit of accolade that anybody could want in their career, and she's earned it all, but something's missing, and so she finds herself in her parents' house where she grew up, in her dad's garage, where she would spend countless hours as he tinkered on a car or whatever, and without getting too much further into it, this wine varietal is flowery, it's intensely floral, it's aromatic. It's a breath of fresh air. It's creative. When you drink it, you almost feel creative. And she is kind of, that same character, but she's off her game now. And so something happens. I don't know how far you'll make it into it.
Well, I don't want to give too much away because it's good for people to sort of, hold something back.
Right.
So let's move along to one of my fave wines, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, the king.
The king. And I loved the juxtaposition of the king of wines to the king in your story.
And the king can't drink any wine.
No.
He's a little boy. He's 9 years old.
Yes, that was interesting.
You didn't expect that, did you?
No.
Cabernet, as you say, it's Cabernet Sauvignon, the king of wines. I mean, it's probably, it's ubiquitous with the word wine. And it's indispensable for many countries as their primary grape that goes into the great wines. I think there's one here,
yes.
The gold label, and I think you have another one as well from one of our fine local wineries.
Yes, North 42.
Right. Oh,
one of
delicious,
very nice Cab Sauves. And I mean, we even abbreviate it. It's just
Cab
sort of
Sauv.
become so part of the lingo, right?
So it is a king. It is a king, and it has all the rights that come with being a monarch. And in this story, the little boy, the 9-year-old, he's the king of his neighborhood. And I don't think he realizes just how special that is and how special this part of his life is. He has a freedom that comes from just pure being a little kid. And now this harkens back to the late 1960s. I believe the Tigers have just won the pennant, and a few other things happened there. But unlike today, where I think you can appreciate, you don't see kids.
No.
It's on a nice spring or summer day. Where are they all?
Yes, we often make that remark. And if you see a child, oh my goodness, there are kids playing out there.
Yeah. How remarkable.
But in the summer of 69, I believe it's in your book.
I think I changed it a little bit. So they actually won the pennant in 68. Okay, so I changed a few things here and there, right?
Yes.
And he was a boy from a city in South Detroit.
Yes.
So there might be a little bit of me in that. Maybe as I see that one. That's about as far as any real character goes. But and so he goes about his day, and his friend had just fallen into a creek, and he was covered in mud and slime, and he eats lunch and so on and so forth. Again, no spoilers here, but I think it's just a delightful romp into how a kid can feel like they're a king. Or a queen as maybe.
Yes, absolutely. I remember when I was a little girl, about the king's age, and a friend and I were walking home, and we went. There was a creek that we had to pass. And she'd been tormenting me on the whole trip. It was about, 5 or 10, maybe 25 minutes to get home. And so I pushed her in the brook.
And how'd that work out?
Oh, not well. Of course, she and I laughed a lot about it after she got over the shock. But our parents weren't impressed.
I'm sure they weren't. Well, I just think about that story as well. Just the whole idea of like little boys, little girls, kids, and they've got this creek, and there's a bridge. There's a bridge right there. And what are they going to do? They're going to take the old branch. That's of course going to break, and they're going to fall in, and that's what kids do.
Yes.
And so it just gives you that feeling.
Now, moving along to Chardonnay, a famous and popular varietal, as you've said, that can't be pigeonholed and is unique. And that then sort of translates into your story, a familiar face.
Right, with Elaine, the main character, and she is singular as well in her appearance. She's one of these folks that we meet in life who they don't blend in with the crowd. They're singular, and in some cases they're breathtakingly attractive. In other cases, there's another reason that they stand out. Right? But they stand out, and they're singular, and she is singular. And in terms of this is a paranormal fantasy, and there's some romance involved. Some people have said that it's their favorite. And
it was very good. It took me a while to start to suspect that something unusual was going to happen.
Right. She meets a thoracic surgeon. And again, without setting it up too much or getting too far into it, they hit it off. But they're both actually singularly unique individuals, but they find that simpatico, and
so the Chardonnay reference or that comparison kind of fits her.
And it can be. Because it depends on how it's grown and how it's made, but it can be a very rich wine. And the other thing interesting that you bring up the Chardonnay. Chardonnay had a tough go because it became too popular for itself.
Right.
Right. You think back to the 1980s called and they want their Chardonnay back, right? Because that's what everybody's ordering now. It seems to be Pinot Noir or Pinot Grigio as a white. But there were a lot of wineries around the world just turning out the same thing. It was carbon copies of one another, and it wasn't really great wine. Over oaked, kind of mono, So now, fortunately, Chardonnay is and always has been more than that. And what you find on the market now is it's really come into its own again as something that is a fine wine that is unique from vintner to vintner and region to region. Yeah.
So let me see what I've got next. Oh, cheap boxed wine. I laughed at that and I thought, I've got to find out why he put that in.
Cheap boxed wine. I mean, it has its own varietal, maybe. Yeah. Some cheap boxed wine is just too cheap and boxy to have a varietal. It's a blend, and we don't know what goes into it. Right. But really, this one started with the idea. And I mean, we all, as writers, we have different ways that we get into a story, or we're inspired to write about something. And for me, it's imagination. And so I had this idea of a story starting with a dripping noise, a dripping sound. And one might think that it's a kitchen tap, a leaky kitchen tap. And as it turns out, it's not. It's the cheap boxed wine on the kitchen counter. and the main character is annoyed, but she's been kind of out of it, having a little unexpected nap, and she wakes up to this sound thinking it's the tap, and she goes in the kitchen. What's happened is the valve on the bottom of that cheap box wine has failed, and the wine is everywhere, all over her floor. So it was really for that one. That's why I didn't really go into much of an explanation. Right. It's not a varietal, but it served a purpose and segues beautifully into that story.
And I thought, I'm not surprised that, it wasn't one of the really spectacular wines that was dripping on the floor. I mean, that would have been heartbreaking.
It would have been. Yeah, it would have been. Now, I don't know if you've enjoyed some cheap boxed wine before.
Oh, I have.
But I have to say, there are some that you got to be kidding me.
I totally agree. Yeah? Totally agree. There's Another, Merlot. Merlot has taken a beating in some sectors, hasn't it?
It sure has. It has, and it's. I think part of it is because it's a common blend wine, right?
Yeah.
It's commonly blended with Cabernet Sauvignon, with Shiraz is another, especially in Australia, and so it kind of takes a back seat because of that blending position. But on its own, it can also be kind of it's easy drinking, right? And I think that's what happened when people go out, and especially if you're not really into wine, what do most of us want? If we enjoy wine, but we don't really want to know about it, we don't need to know a lot about it. We just want something.
Let me like it.
Right, let me like it.
Yeah.
And I think Merlot fits the palate in that regard. But there's more to it.
And what did you pair that up with?
Sarah and Jacob. The main character is Jacob. Sarah's his little sister, older sister.
Oh yeah, this was unusual.
Yeah. So there's a knock at the door. Dad is home from work. He has somebody with him, and he is the mysterious visitor. And the mysterious visitor has information to impart, to share not only with mom and dad, but with Sarah and especially with Jacob. And what he tells him will have a profound impact on the rest of his life and on the lives of his children. And again, this is one that would be very, it's heartwarming.
Yes.
It's heartwarming when you realize what's happening. I can't go much further into this.
No, because you really don't want to give any of this away because it was quite a twist.
There's a twist, and it's something that when you look at it, interesting as the author, reading it, we were talking about this before the show, how you read your own works, and you sometime after you write them and you go back and say, oh,
did I write that?
Yeah. And with this story here, I remember back before it was actually published, and I went back to this one, and I thought, okay, that's really interesting. I didn't see that coming, even though I wrote it.
Yeah. So another one that was new to me, Touriga Nacional.
Okay, Touriga Nacional. It is an indispensable grape in Portugal. And so you'll find it's for port wines, for instance.
Oh, I love port.
Oh, yeah. In port is, again, there's another wine that can have so many different characters if it's a vintage port or, just a blended off the shelf kind of thing. But Touriga Nacional is in port and many other Portuguese wines. And it is very versatile, but it is it makes a deep wine. You'll often taste like a plummy aspect to it. It has a pretty firm tannic backbone. And with this one, this is I warn people. I warned them in the story before we segue from the wine into the story. Be warned, and at the end, I say you were warned.
Yeah.
So it's different from a lot of the other stories in terms of it being true crime.
Yes.
And
poor Jiminy.
Oh, poor Jiminy. Yeah, Jimmy. His mom called him Jiminy.
Yeah.
Oh, no, his mom didn't. His mom called him Jimmy. His name is James. And in his early introduction into a life of crime, one of his gang mates calls him Jiminy, and he had an affinity, I say, for an animated character. We know who we're talking about here.
Yes, indeed.
Right. So, and poor Jiminy, he's an underling. He's taken in by the town's biggest thug, who's very well connected. He's connected to the police and the courts and everybody else. He's got his fingers in everything that makes money that shouldn't be making money that way. And Jiminy, he has visions of being the next Tony Soprano.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he realized that Tony Soprano wasn't a good guy.
Wasn't a good guy. And I don't think he realized he wasn't real. Yeah. He thought he was a real guy. So, and what happens, he goes on a job. What I really love about this story is, and for whatever reason, as I was putting this one together, I kept seeing the hideout. And so this one's a little thick, I think, on description. But I've had some people tell me this was one of their favorite stories, and they love because they could actually see what I was seeing.
Yes,
yeah.
And it has this darkness and the dark character.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move along to Tempranillo.
So another one, paranormal romance. I like to think more romance than paranormal, except when you get to the end. And some things didn't quite make sense until you get to the end, and it all ties together. Tempranillo, again, is it's a Spanish wine. Again, another one of these indispensable wines or varietals when it comes to what a country puts out in terms of their wines. It is another one of these. It can be a very dark brooding wine. It can also, though, be very light and easy drinking. So again, it depends on how it's made and where it's grown and how it's grown. In this particular story, the main character, and I got really far away from my normal style of writing in that this one is first-person narrative.
Yes, that was different.
And there's another story that's a first-person narrative that is told from a female voice. And I had somebody ask me, "How do you do that?" I don't know.
I make stuff up.
But yeah, for this one, he lives in New Orleans. And he's going to Spain, and he has a 5 or 7 day stopover in Spain, Valencia. They sell this really, like he even says, overpriced software. And when they sell this they sell it all over the world, and they sell it to police organizations, sometimes police departments, etc. And so he's going over after the sale, as many professional salespersons do. And what they do is this after sales service, make sure everything is okay. There's some handshaking, there's some taking people out to dinner, and so on and so forth. In this case, the sale has been kind of shared between, it would be something tantamount to with the Windsor police and the OPP and the RCMP. They're all kind of sharing the cost and getting together in it. So he ends up having a dinner, and he meets somebody. And her name is Paula. And Paula actually works in Madrid and lives in Madrid, but she came down for this meeting, and they hit it off, and they spend several days together before he has to leave and she has to leave.
And something weird happens.
And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wait till you read this one. Okay, so I know time is getting short, which is always so frustrating. So we have to move along to Amarone.
Oh, Amarone.
Oh, my goodness. You brought quite a nice one. Oh,
I did. It's a 2000.
Like I said, I'm coming over to drink.
We'll do that. Absolutely. So Amarone it's an interesting. It's not a varietal. Okay, so this one is a style of wine. It's also, in terms of you cannot. This is an Italian wine, and you cannot sell or label an Italian wine as an Amarone anywhere else in the world, for that matter, unless it comes from a certain region in Italy, and it has to have a certain type of grape. But the primary thing about Amarone is how it's made. And so Amarone is made by, they take the grapes, during harvest, they separate them, they put them on drying mats in barns, and they dry the grapes to almost a raisin-like stage. So now you can imagine what happens with the flavors. They're so concentrated, the colors and the sugars. So Amarone, of course, because of the sugars, it's going to turn out to be a high alcohol wine, but a blockbuster in most cases. And
so we won't talk about the characters. You're just going to have to read it, because it's very sweet.
It is.
Very sweet, like the wine.
And that one, if I could add, that one is actually about a winemaker.
Yes,
so a lot of people ask, they say, so this is a book about wine. Not really. It's a container, but there are a couple of stories that are about winemakers.
Yes.
That's one of them.
So, Sauvignon Blanc.
This is about Pammy Pickerpot.
I won't ask.
Sauvignon Blanc, let me ask you, do you like Sauvignon Blanc?
I do, actually, but I really like it icy cold.
And I would agree, because that's the only way I will drink it.
Yes.
It's not my favorite. I'll be honest with you. I know the New Zealanders, they grow and make a lot of this wine, and they colloquially refer to it as cat's pee in a gooseberry bush. Just saying that's what it tastes like to many people.
I'll tell all my friends who like
it. But I love that story. It follows somebody who's on stage. She writes books. She speaks. She gets a gathering, a fan base that's tremendous, and she starts doing shows. And what happens with her? He said, she said. Is she changes over time. And her message goes from one that's inspirational and maybe faith-filled to something that's really awful. And what happens in the pages as we move to the turnaround. There is a turnaround.
Yes.
She doesn't know what's happening to her.
No,
She has
again,
no idea.
some very interesting writing in that story. So do you have a favorite wine?
Oh, I do. I do. And this is going to sound really odd. My favorite wine, I couldn't tell you what it is. I know it's a super Tuscan, okay, from the Tuscany area of Italy. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
But you know what made it favorite was the ambience, the experience. And I think that's something really important to know about wine, right? You can taste a wine at one setting and another is not the same at all.
Absolutely.
Right?
I agree. And I think a lot of people find that. Do you have a favorite story in the book? Favorite character?
Okay. Is it okay if an author reading his or her own book starts to cry? Reading his or her own story. And I do. It's this first one. It's the Torontes. It's the Warm Memories of Baseball. I can't get to the end. And I'm actually just starting to tear up a little right now. I can't get to the end without just, and there's a few like that.
Yeah.
I think because of the visceral emotion that I feel, it becomes one of my favorites just because it moves me that much.
And probably because it came from somewhere very deep when you're writing
Most likely,
it.
yeah.
Before we run off, was there a least liked character?
I think there are at least yes, as perhaps a few of them begin. Because if you think about it, there does seem to be an overriding idea in most of the stories that there is a change in some of those characters that had some undesirable qualities.
Okay, what wine would you pair with Stephen Kristof?
With me, probably an Amarone.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
It's great fun, and really, anyone who sits down with a glass of wine is going to really have fun reading your book. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for this edition of Scribes and Songsters. Many thanks to my guest, Stephen Kristof. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, Vero.
And look for his book at all sorts of places, local bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the Windsor Public Library, just about anywhere. Make sure you go ask for it. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brian Sweet, and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Cheers for now.